Note speaker that when Team Canada challenges us to tell them why FTAs are different in that representative democracy doesn't work, they've missed the entirety of Kate's first point, which is essentially that in this case, representative democracy is illegitimate because we cannot have a broad consensus of people. Insofar as that is true, all their points on representative democracy still rest on whether or not they can get better outcomes. So that's one framework through which you should view this debate. But secondly, we'll tell you that their case is so unnuanced in that they seem to support literally every free trade agreement there is. Whereas on our side, we'll tell you that we are able to get better FTAs in two ways. First, we're able to better identify them, and secondly, we're able to get better negotiation, more things that went unresponded to. But third, I'm absolutely shocked that the one response they gave to us on developing countries and about how FTAs impact them was that, oh, elections in developing countries are rigged. We think if Canada wants to get so worked up about representative democracy, they need to tell us why the countries that are the most to gain or lose from FTAs are ones in which they don't want this model to hold true. No, thank you. So those are the three things through which you should view this debate. 3 points of clash. First, whether it's principally necessary to ratify FTAs through referendums. Secondly, whether we get better FTAs on our side. And third, who is better for developing countries. First, on whether it's principally necessary to ratify FTAs through referendums. Their stance here, note, was a bunch of reasons why people can't make decisions. So we'll do 3 things. First, we mitigate all these reasons and we'll tell you that people can actually make good decisions and there can be some sort of informational asymmetry, at least at the point at which you get like normal elections, right? Secondly, we'll tell you that actually FTAs change fundamentally important constitutional structures, and insofar as that is true, people should be able to weigh in. Third, we'll tell you that even if people make bad decisions, that's totally cool, right? Because the principle that we're putting forward in this debate is that like self-determination is an end in and of itself. Sure. But first, note speaker, they like a model of like experts plus consultation, right? Our model in this debate is also like executives, i.e. experts, being able to negotiate free trade deals along with consultation and final approval with a bunch of people. So whatever benefits they speak about with their model of consultation with like lobby groups, we get too. But onto why people make good decisions. First, we'll tell you that we actually do get info from interest groups, the groups they seem to like so much. We think that groups such as the AFL-CIO or the Chamber of Commerce in America have incentives to aggressively campaign. We think there is a lot of information there. Secondly, we tell you that they seem to think technocrats make better decisions. Technocrats who can't for 2 reasons. First, because they seem to support this, technocrats throughout have supported economic dogma that has been consistently free trade over the past 200 years, despite the fact that the last 3 decades have shown us that free trade has some very nuanced problems and distributive effects. No, thank you. Secondly, we tell you technocrats are disconnected, something they haven't dealt with. Then the next thing they tell us is about the immediate impact and how people are more affected by that. In response, we'll tell you, if I'm one of the 600,000 people who lost a job because of NAFTA, it is totally legitimate for me to be able to vote according to immediate impact, right? Sure. They need to tell us why that's not true. They need to tell us why people can't make decisions in their own self-interest. That's the point of democracy, right? Note here that they tell us that people can apparently, technocrats apparently make better decisions about the quality of life of people. We tell you that insofar as I'm living in Elkhart, Pennsylvania, and I've lost my job, I can make better decisions about the quality of my own life. But we'll tell you that if there one data point on this and people not being able to make decisions is Brexit, we'll tell you that first, they misidentify the point at which Brexit is relevant. We think that if when the UK decided to join the European Union and when the European Union became a superstate, if we had a referendum, people wouldn't have felt so disconnected from the elites that allowed them to join the EU. We think in that case we wouldn't have had the anger we see. No, thank you. But then we'll give you another data point, like Switzerland, which has the most nuanced and complex economic position in Europe, right? It has some deals with some countries that's out of the EU, but it's part of the free movement of labor market. We think in this case, the Swiss voters, who by the way are very old and are also not as educated as voters in some other countries, we'll tell you these people are also able to make better decisions. They need to tell us why that's not true. So we've proven to you why we actually get better decisions. But look, secondly, we'll tell you that often FTAs are about much more than free trade, right? We'll tell you about the case of Australia and the investor settlement dispute system, in which big tobacco sued Australia for trying to have warning labels on tobacco because of a free trade agreement that they signed. Sure. At that point, people literally can't act to save their own health, right? That fundamentally constrains the decision-making capabilities of domestic institutions. That's your nuance. That's what you've been looking for. Yes.
When NAFTA was originally signed, it had 30% approval from populations Now it has 70. That agreement would never have existed under your side.
Okay, so first, empirically untrue, right? Like Donald Trump's entire candidacy is based on like overturning NAFTA. Like Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders both literally took like an anti-NAFTA, anti-free trade position. So like empirically untrue. But also more importantly, we'll tell you that if like NAFTA approval was so low, in that case, like politicians would have incorporated better measures to make NAFTA more palatable and better for the population at that point. Which moves me to like which moves me to my next point, which is on whether it is like whether we get better FTAs on our side. So note speaker, like the entire point about like representative democracy here goes on like better outcomes. Here's why we get better outcomes. 2 points. First, we'll tell you on the point of identification, we can identify which FTAs are better. 4 reasons Kate gave you on how people are better able to identify which reasons are important. Their only response was to say people are idiots, they can't make decisions. We already responded to that. But the second thing we'll tell you is that we are able to get better negotiations. 3 ways. First, we told you, like, and in response to all that stuff about consultation, that's not mutually exclusive, right? If they like experts plus consultation, we have that too. Secondly, why our side is better. 4 points we told you about why people are better represented in negotiations. If you know that you are going to vote, your representative is like, or like your executive is more likely to take into account what you think. Again, Switzerland will prove to you that like most decisions in Switzerland are made like through referendums, all like foreign deals are approved through there, and we'll tell you we win on that side. But the third thing we'll tell you is that like FTAs are like better, FTAs are, and this is in response to all the stuff they tell us about like how you don't have credibility in negotiations and what we hear from Second Law, we tell you FTAs are better protected because once a referendum has been passed, they are much more likely to hold. It is far harder for like Donald Trump to overturn NAFTA once it has already been improved in a referendum. So we think we beat all their points in that case. We think we win that. But then let's deal with the next thing that they tell us. And this was like a kind of a principal point where they said, well, actually, the only reason that we have democracy is so like I can determine my quality of life. If I can't, that's not legitimate. We'll tell you that like that is not a legitimate principle in and of itself because we value self-determination as an end, right? We value democracy as something that gives people meaning and value and allows them to decide their own constitutional structures, right? Here's the reason why. Like, we're not going to get technocrats to run your country just because trains might run like 1 minute faster, right? We don't think that's a reason enough. We think the entire point of democracy is that you're able to make better decisions. But then on to this next point on developing countries. We told you first why this is so important, because they're so vulnerable. Like, if Australia can get like out-litigated by big tobacco, imagine like, you know, Côte d'Ivoire, which got out-litigated by Trafigura when they literally like dumped a lot of toxic waste over there. Secondly, we'll tell you about like the high stakes that are there. These countries are open to liberalization and are like praying grounds for MNCs. This is particularly important because they responded to nothing except to say referendums are illegitimate because like lots of elections are corrupt. Note, India, country with the largest elections in the world. Note, Kenya, which saw a massive outcry against FDI, which led to FDI being outruled slightly. Also a democratic country with a growing middle class. They can't respond to all our nuance just by telling us that literally all developing countries are corrupt, right? We'll tell you that even if they give us a more nuanced argument, which is to say that like developing countries don't often have, or like lack of information is accentuated, we'll tell you that in our case, it's actually better because like developing countries have like a significant point in policy issues between experts, right? Insofar as experts are cool, we think experts will talk about developing countries. People in developing countries will be able to engage with broader policy debates as they have in Bangladesh, as they have in Brazil, all the examples that Munshi gives you. So what are we left with in this debate? We proved to you indisputably that we win on this principal point, that we must have people weigh in on FTAs on a number of nuanced reasons. Next, we told you that we get better FTAs at the point of identification and negotiation. Third, we told you, and something that loosened this entire debate, that developing countries are most vulnerable to FTAs or like misguided FTAs, and they lose on that respect.